I saw something in the new Spider-Man movie that told me that I absolutely had to make a video about it. One, it was not at all what I thought I was going to end up seeing or picking up from the movie. And two, after seeing it, I'm more than convinced that Spider-Man No Way Home is the most esoteric Marvel movie I have seen, and possibly the most spiritually dense in its themes that Marvel has ever made. Though by the end of this video, I would like to see if you agree once I reveal why. Before I start, I want to see how you interpret this ilu. As always, no answer is wrong, but this particular ilu points to exactly what I ended up seeing in No Way Out that told me that I have to make a video. The ilu is Onyeji Madonani Jionweya. Again, that is Onyeji Madonani Jionweya. A person who holds another person down is holding themselves. As always, no answer is wrong, and every ilu will say something slightly different to each person who hears it. The value of it, or the power of an ilu, is being able to come with your own personal interpretation. And for me, there's something in this ilu that ended up playing out as the grander theme of No Way Out that actually left me very surprised. Now, I had a lot of fun making this particular video, so if you want me to analyze more movies and shows through the lens of Odinani, let me know which shows or movies I should check out. If you're new to this channel, I make videos on Igbo spirituality, cosmology, and culture. If this is a topic that you are interested in, hit subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos like this. The best way to support this channel is by joining the Patreon at patreon.com/TheMedicineShell. As a thank you to my patrons, I offer full access to my library of over 400 books, articles, and studies on Odinani, Igbo Cosmology, and history that I use for my own research. I also give patrons at all levels access to the digital Igbo lunar calendar that merges with your Google Calendar and tells you exactly which market day it is, which is very important as far as ritual goes, prayer, and practice. It also lets you know what moon that we're in and gives you the full 13 moon lunar calendar, as well as the meaning of each moon and some things an individual should consider, as well as one of my favorite things about the Patreon, which is our Odinani group study, where we pick a topic and explore it in an open conversation. One of the last discussions we had was on the curse of the mask in the NBA and how much what was happening in the NBA paralleled what our ancestors had to say about masks as a whole, how masks are used in healing, transformation, trance, and building the self, as well as in confronting trauma. So if you're interested and you want to support the channel, join at patreon.com/TheMedicineShell. Now, last year we had an in-house Debia, but as of this year I am discontinuing the service. If you're still interested in speaking to somebody and receiving guidance from an ancestral perspective on personal challenges and spiritual growth, I'm now offering one-to-ones on peopletalk.com/TheMedicineShell, which I have left the link below. Now, the difference between myself and the Debia is that I can't prepare remedies and I don't do afa, but everything else as far as building and giving perspective and clarity, I'd gladly help you with. Again, that is peopletalk.com/TheMedicineShell. And finally, I am proud to announce that my Igbo language and custom school has been launched. Very proud to say that seats are going fast too, so thank you guys for picking us and supporting as always. The platform is kedu.me, and if you've made it a goal to become fluent in Igbo by the end of this year, we're offering a teaching style rooted in the ancestral perspective that is tailor-fitted to each student and conducted by an Avengers team of teachers that I've personally assembled. Kedu.me doesn't just teach you how to speak Igbo, but how to own it confidently in a safe, no judgment learning space that combines group study with one-to-one coaching. The website is kedu.me. I'll be enrolling in Asusu Igbo Level 2 because if you've read the comments, I definitely need help with pronunciation. And that one starts at the end of the month, so if you're enrolling, then we're going to be classmates. There are also classes for kids, so if you have little ones like myself or nieces and nephews, you can go ahead and enroll them. Kedu.me. And with that being said, let's begin. Spider-Man No Way Home is the first Tom Holland Spider-Man movie I've seen. And my most immediate visual reference for Spider-Man is going to the library as a kid and drawing the panels from the comics like very obsessively. Then there was the cartoon series in the 90s, and of course the 3 Tobey Maguire movies in the early 2000s before I kind of tapped out on the franchise as a whole. So when watching this one, I was very out of step. I had not seen the previous movie, and with the way this movie starts, you would kind of need to see the previous movie for a little bit of reference. Otherwise, you're going to be confused in the beginning. Now, this movie starts immediately after the world finds out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And so he, his girlfriend, his best friend, and his family, which is primarily his aunt, are stuck in a situation where moment by moment the ordinariness of their lives gets stripped away from them as a result of the big reveal. Peter's aunt's home gets swarmed by journalists. Individuals in the media who are not Alex Jones dedicate themselves to criminalizing Spider-Man and by extension criminalizing Peter Parker, the people around him. His friends start losing privacy in their ordinary lives, and the controversies that follow Spider-Man as an individual, from collateral damage while fighting to public sympathies for certain villains, becomes a part of their lives as well. They have to carry his burden without any of his superpowers or any of the privileges that come with being Spider-Man. Now, what makes it interesting is that at its core, the Spider-Man I grew up with was always about a regular guy living a regular and an extraordinary life at the same time, which was only possible due to the distance he had placed between those two worlds with the mask. There was the world of Spider-Man and the world of Peter Parker. So in this movie, the actual villain ends up being notoriety itself, above anything else, and the collateral damage it causes on the lives of the people around Peter when those two worlds end up colliding and becoming the same thing. Now, things keep getting worse for Peter as he finds out that the notoriety that comes from the big reveal that Peter Parker is Spider-Man eats away at his regular life. But what makes it a particular crisis for him as a person is watching it eat away at the lives of the people he cares about, his Aunt May, and especially his girlfriend and best friend. Now, the last straw for Peter and his two closest friends begins when they're applying for college, as they're just wrapping up high school in the beginning of the movie. Now, despite being what any university would classify as good students or individuals who they would want in their student body, Spider-Man and his two closest friends deal with a string of rejection solely based on the fact that the universities don't want to inherit the notoriety that comes from having Spider-Man on campus. And from this, Peter Parker watches opportunities slide away from his friends as a consequence of them knowing him, being close to him. When all three friends end up rejected by MIT, Peter gets desperate, and that's where things take a turn. In Igbo Cosmology, the world is predestined. All things that are to happen have already happened. And while we as individuals can take action to change the road, all things that are happening have a set destination. And while we as individuals can take action to change the route or the road by which we reach that destination, ultimately we will arrive at the place that our chi, or our conceiving spark, brought us into existence to arrive at. And this is expressed in the Ilu: destiny can be delayed, but it can't be changed. The predetermined fate is known as Akaraka. Akaraka literally translates into the etchings of the palm, which are physical representations of the pathways in time and space, an existence that an individual's full essence, or mano, your physical incarnation, and mo, your auraic incarnation, will walk, so long as you are a parcel of existence. Akaraka can be compared to the tracks of a train, and while a train can be late, stalled, or ahead of schedule, ultimately the train itself is dependent on the fixed course of the tracks before it, to the point that even deviations can only be done on pre-laid tracks. In the reincarnation process, your chi makes an agreement with creation, or eke, to do and be whatever it is your chi determines for you to do and be. This pact comes with an agreement to obey the laws of creation, or iwala, the laws of the land. And upon making this pact, an individual receives their ofondo, or their life oath, which is sometimes known as the Iyuwa, your universal stream. Now, earlier I said that all people are created by a spark of divinity known as the chi, the way a book or a movie is created by a spark of inspiration, resulting in a spiraling of action and inspiration that gives the book or movie a physical form, known as eke, making all things chineke, and chineke being the formula for creation, and thus the full name of God. The chi being the intangible conceiving spark, and the eke being the tangible existence of that spark as a facet of reality. The agreement the chi and the eke make with each other is known as ofo. And Alfa is a covenant or truth that is laid forward in order for something to come into existence. Alfa is therefore the root of all law, truth, and justice. And Alfa gives an individual or facet of creation license over its existence and truth. Your Alfondum gives you as an individual access to existence, the way an apartment lease gives you access to your apartment. All things have an alpha which binds them into the laws of creation, as well as giving them legal dominion in a cosmic sense over a specific space within creation and truth that is theirs, something that we typically refer to as a purpose. as well as their destiny. Like an apartment lease, the agreements you make within, such as paying rent or not bringing pets into the complex and so forth, give you what you sought out when you made the agreement, which is a place to live and call your own. This agreement becomes the basis of relations between you and the leasing company or landlord, as far as law, truth, and justice are concerned, meaning that neither of you can violate this lease. And if the lease is violated or the agreement is violated on any end, when justice is appealed to, it will be rectified based on the terms of this all-fault or this agreement. But there's an extremely powerful aspect of the all-fault, which brings me to the reason I made this particular video. And the thing that I saw in No Way Home that opened my eyes to how esoterically packed the movie was, for lack of a better term. Peter Parker, after seeing how much his popularity was destroying the lives of his friends and family, began to fight back against the real villain of the movie, which again was his notoriety. Now, I did not see the previous movie, so if a relationship between him and Doctor Strange was established, it would make a little more sense. But I was taken back to see that Peter, as a part of his solution, goes directly to Doctor Strange, looking for a way out of his newfound reality. After a lot of hesitation, Doctor Strange agrees to go ahead and help Peter. But what's important to pay attention to is exactly what makes Doctor Strange so hesitant. In Odinani and Igbo, reality is fixed but can be manipulated. But manipulation does not fully equal alteration. Eke, or creation, is a fixed principle. Earlier I alluded to the Akaraka, or your pathways in life, which function like a rail system, leading you to a specific pre-laid destination. So while you have your path, the people of the world have their own paths, as do the objects of the world. The laws of space and time and all things in existence have their own paths, which creates an extremely dense fabric of interweaving paths. That is reality itself. This creates a universe that is a blanket of strings, crossing and interweaving, intersecting, and looping across each other. These strings, which function like the rail in my previous analogy, are known as ete. Reality is therefore a web of ete. And the ancestral worldview, this web is repaired and expanded into time and space by the galactic spider known as Udide, or Ududo, or Kanka, translating to the master craftsmith who keeps and repairs balance. Udide is a galactic fixing force of ete, the strings of reality. Now, being that I was walking into Spider-Man, I was thinking that I would pick up a few things in that movie that I can throw into a video about the Galactic Spider. But there was something else that I saw that was way louder as far as the theme. And that was the thing that made me realize that this movie was one of the most esoterically packed Marvel movies I had ever seen. And I'll get to that shortly. Now, if an individual within reality identifies a rip in the fabric of existence, which to our ancestors was referred to as Ogodokamosu, the fabric of reality, and they wish to patch it, we are stuck having to tear another piece of fabric from another place in reality to use to patch it. And ultimately, there will still be a hole somewhere else within that fabric, even though the hole that we wanted to patch is now patched. Now, this is extremely important to remember because it ties back to why I decided to make this particular video. Now, Doctor Strange understands this and makes it clear to Peter that solutions to these types of issues are not easy to come by and can create issues elsewhere in reality. And while he has the power to manipulate the laws of creation, he is still bound by them and must play within their given construct. Now, Dr. Strange's hesitation comes largely from the fact that Peter requests a spell that will cause the world's memory to reset to the time just before anyone knew that he was Spider-Man, a time before the virus of notoriety had started. Now, this is extremely interesting because in my Ichuaja, or Sacrifice Explained video, I spoke about the idea that in Igbo Cosmology, all things come into the world in twos. The things that we don't like are permanently attached to something that we do like. And it is the fact that we like one end of it that keeps the unwanted end tethered into our reality. Now, being mortal or being unwise, we can often only see one end, with the end we want in our reality being the roots, and the end we don't want typically being the tree that emerges from the root. To the ofeke, or uninitiated, a tree grows upwards. To a person who is wise, a tree grows in two directions. And in order to free yourself from the things you don't like, you would have to remove its root, which is something that you do like or do want and don't want to lose. Doctor Strange illustrates this by telling Peter, in his own words, that he won't just lose the notoriety of the general public, but his friends and family will also forget, which is extremely unfortunate for Peter because his friendships and relationship with Aunt May as well as the love between him and his girlfriend, depends on the intimacy of understanding that he is Spider-Man and how close that revelation made them all. Knowing Peter Parker as a person and knowing that Peter Parker is Spider-Man is too interconnected to be separated. And therefore, if the public forgets that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, his friends will forget that Peter Parker is Peter Parker. But finally, Doctor Strange agrees. And while he's doing his spell, Peter Parker realizes that this fate is worse than the one he is currently experiencing on a personal level. So while the spell's being cast, Peter keeps having Doctor Strange change the wording to fit exactly what Peter wants to see as an ideal. For example, one of the things he threw in there was that everybody forgets except his friends. And a few more happen, but they're not coming to me right now. In the process of trying to repair the hole that Peter's notoriety had created, Doctor Strange rips several allegorical patches from other places in the fabric of creation in order to cast his spell. And with each adjustment, a new tear is made elsewhere, until Peter achieves the exact formula he is comfortable with, which keeps all of the things he wants in his reality intact, while removing all of the inconveniences that previously came with them. Things then take a turn for the worse. After ripping the allegorical patches from elsewhere in reality to patch up the hole that Peter had created for himself, the fabric of reality tears wide open, and leaks in space and time are created, which bleeds in alternate realities into Peter's current reality from what is known as the metaverse. By the end of Doctor Strange's spell, all of the realities in the alternate universes of the Spider-Man world begin to blur. Villains from the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man begin appearing in the world of the Tom Holland Spider-Man. And because all things come in twos, the bad from the alternate universes are accompanied with the good, meaning that with the coming of the villains from the Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire Spider-Man universes come the Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. In Igbo Cosmology, the reality of things entering in polarities is symbolized by how a masquerade enters a community. When a masquerade is brought into a community, it comes in two forms. A beauty, which is a masquerade that is typically designed to be aesthetically pleasing and entertaining to the public, visible to men, women, and children, and generally seen as a cause of celebration. And then there is a beast, a more fearsome, masculine masquerade, which women, children, and men who are not initiated into the secret society or mystery school that controls that masquerade are not allowed to see. The good masquerade typically dances and is the anchor of the celebration, which both of the masquerades come to initiate, while the other typically marches, dancing in small bursts, but can also beat, chase, and intimidate anybody who sets eyes on it without paying it its due respect. Oftentimes, these polarities are emphasized with timing, with the beauty appearing at day and the beast appearing at night. In this movie, the emergence of both masquerades creates a new world of problems. Peter realizes the new tears in the fabric he created, and Doctor Strange opts to return all of the newly emerged villains back to their respective worlds. But Peter realizes that due to the events of the previous worlds they came from, they would all end up dying by the time they return. And if you've seen the movies that all of them feature in, chronologically, that does make sense, though I don't think I'm at liberty to explain each one since I haven't seen them all. Wanting to spare their lives, and again avoid the Akaraka that says each of these villains will die, Spider-Man stops Doctor Strange from casting a spell that will return them into their respective worlds and timelines. At this point, Peter had developed empathy for them and began seeing the villains from the other worlds as people worthy of saving. With Doctor Strange out of the way, Peter then goes on a mission to fix the mess that he made by trying to rehabilitate the newfound villains and give them a new start in a new reality. Now, fast forwarding a little further into the movie, the death that was fated for the villains, which he had patched by cheating reality, avoids the villains as he had intended, but falls on somebody he cares about even more. By tearing a piece of the Ogodakamosu to place life where death was fated, a new hole opened elsewhere, and that death, which was fated for the villains, lands on his Aunt May. Now, earlier, I had said there was something that I saw in the movie that made me see that this movie was very esoterically charged as far as its themes. I went into the movie thinking I would get material that I can use to speak about Udide, the cosmic spider. But while watching it, something else emerged that was a little more pressing. That led me into making this video. Earlier, I spoke about the offal, or the agreement that you make with creation, and how it has an extremely powerful component that I'll speak about Well, that component is the reason that I decided to make this particular video. And the thing that I saw, which was the central theme of this movie. Ultimately, the tears in the fabric of space and time, their consequence, the powerful component connected to the Ofo, and the theme of this movie is the concept of Ogun. And I should have seen this coming because 9 out of 10 times, superhero movies, and even the concept of the superhero itself, is intimately tied with the concept of Ogun. Ogun is the balancing, retributive force of the Ofo. Earlier, I compared the Ofo to an apartment lease. When you sign the lease and agree to its principles or rules, you create an understanding between you and the apartment, which is protected by justice itself. Meaning that if you're holding up to your end of the agreement, you're paying your bills and you're not bringing in prohibited pets, the complex, your neighbors, and any other person cannot throw you out of that apartment. The force of justice allows you to own that space and call that space your own. And that space cannot be taken from you by anything but justice itself. That contract or offer that gave you the apartment also protects you from anything and anyone that wishes to take it from you, so long as you are following the principles that you had agreed to follow. So your neighbor flips out, grabs you by the collar and throws you out of your apartment, plants her flag in your living room, and decides that this is her apartment now after beating her chest. But ultimately, when justice is appealed to, the agreement of the all-fall is rebalanced. You will regain your apartment, since the way you were thrown out is unjust, and you still had Oguama, or good Ogun, or good standing with your Ogun. On the flip side, that same justice which is created once the all-fall or the agreement is made will even punish your neighbor for violating the all-fall of the complex, the force that allows you to call an apartment space your own once you sign a lease and protects you from losing it so long as you are keeping to its agreement is known as Ogun. Ogun is the balancing, retributive force of the all-fall. And on the flip side, it is also what will allow justice to fall on the side of the complex if you do break the all-fall and they choose to throw you out or evict you. Ogun is the scale that balances all things in accordance to its laws. And it is because of Ogun that we know that an all-fall exists. The law of gravity, for example, was first identified empirically by making an observation about its Ogun. What goes up must come down. This law of physics can only be observed by the actualization of its Ogun. Now, in my video of fall explained, I said that there was no possible way I could translate Ogun into English. There are elements of retribution there, pieces of what you can call karma or even dharma in there, and so forth. But ultimately, it is the core that gives those things meaning rather than the things themselves, if that makes any sense. Now, most superhero movies exist to enforce the concept of Ogun, or at least explore it at its most minimal level. This is to say that when justice is breached, it is the superhero in these movies that works as a physical embodiment of Ogun, restoring balance, or using the ability given to them to work as a vanguard of upholding moral and legal truths, the way Ogun works to uphold the Ofo. In Igbo Cosmology, it is the masculine Abara that serve in this role, and the feminine which serves as the holder of an Ofo, specific to what it represents. So earlier I spoke about your chi, carrying you into existence, or Eke, where you as an individual make a pact with creation. Your chi, no matter who you are, in this role is masculine, and Eke is feminine, meaning that when you violate the laws of Eke, it is your own chi that will punish you. And this is expressed in the Ilu, Ebobula Madondara. Wherever a person falls is where they push them down. The evil that happens to you is permitted by your chi as a consequence of you not following your all-fall, similar to an individual being evicted, and justice, or the Ogun, being on their side because you haven't paid your rent. If you're interested in details on the concept of all-fall, or the all-fall Ogun based cosmic and legal justice system, I have a video called All-Fall Explained, which I have linked below in the description. And there's an essential understanding of all-fall Ogun that's intimately tied to the central ethos of the Spiderman franchise. All things given to you by creation are a form of Ogun, as Ogun is power itself. The power to call an apartment space your own by following the agreement you made from the source by which the space comes from. It is the Ogun of the agreement made that protects the individual by use of the force of justice. And in keeping to the agreement by which that power comes from, an individual is in alignment with its all-fall. The responsibility that comes from this newfound power, or as Stan Lee put it, with great power comes great responsibility. With the protection of Ogun comes the responsibility to keep the awful. One of the most visible aspects of any African spiritual system is the feature of sacrifice, and most visibly among the sacrifices, blood sacrifice. And this is intimately tied to the concept of Alfonugu, as well as the theme of the movie itself, and ultimately what Spider-Man ends up seeing that causes him to change his direction. All things received by the universe come in twos. Life is made possible by the existence of death. To increase one's life requires increasing death elsewhere, as we see when we eat, which is impossible to do without inflicting death on plants and animals to increase and sustain life within ourselves. In Igbo Cosmology, because all things enter the world with a negative, double, ichuaja or sacrifice becomes a means of receiving a good while mitigating or transferring the bad onto whatever is being sacrificed. When an individual is bringing something good onto themselves from the cosmos, there is an understanding that that good will come with something that is unwanted and equal in its negativity to the positivity of that which you seek. And therefore a sacrifice is given so that the bad, which is on its way, lands onto something that is known and controlled, rather than something that is unknown and unexpected. In contemporary science, we see the same concept in animal experimentation. In order for us to know if something is safe for human ingestion, a human being must take it and suffer its consequences so that those consequences are understood. And because it is specifically the positive benefits that we seek and not the consequence, we test the medicine on animals so that the negative ogun or consequence that comes with acquiring the knowledge of a medicine's safety is transferred onto an animal or transferred onto something that we know and can control, as opposed to releasing the medicine onto the public without testing and watching the negative ogun take the lives or health of what we cannot control and do not know. The same concept applies to crash test dummies, movie stunt persons, and animals or robots that seek out landmines, among many other examples. In No Way Out, the death that was known and predestined for Spider-Man's metaverse villains was subverted, and ultimately, Ichuaja, or sacrifice, fell upon Aunt May, a target that was unknown and unintended, as according to the laws of the universe, that death must be, and though it can be delayed, can't be changed. This particular tragedy is the point by which Spider-Man breaks, and upon breaking, he realizes what the theme of the movie had made very vivid, that he had been taking on the good of his situation and bending reality to assure that he receives only the good. With each attempt to patch one hole, Peter tore a piece of cloth from somewhere else, leaving him stuck to patch the new hole by creating another hole elsewhere, on and on, until finally he couldn't run anymore. I really like this movie because outside of it being packed with nostalgia and even with the amount of villains that were on display, ultimately the real antagonist of the movie was a very abstract concept that both the heroes and the villains had to face equally and make decisions about within their world. In the end, Peter performs Ichuaja to fix the mess that he had made, understanding that if he wants to defeat the villain of the movie, which was his own notoriety, that he had to accept both sides of this victory and everything that it brought into the world with it. The fact that the same awareness that brought the world uncomfortably close to him is the same awareness that built his circle of friends and loved ones. In the end, he performs the sacrifice by following what Doctor Strange had recommended all along. Spider-Man allows Doctor Strange to do the spell exactly as it was designed to be. His notoriety goes away. The media, the city, and strangers forget that they ever knew of a person named Peter Parker and the fact that he was Spider-Man. And at the same time, just before the two get accepted into MIT, Peter accepts that his two best friends will lose all knowledge of him as a person and thus no longer be a part of his life going forward. In an effort to have everything at once, Peter ended up losing everything he cared about. But the movie did a great job of making you, as a viewer, feel good about that consequence and accept it the way he ultimately came to accept it. And that's it. Now, it was very interesting watching Spider-Man explore the concepts of Ogun, most specifically the concept of delaying Ogun or delaying consequence, and seeing how well it aligned with much of what our ancestors said. Now, making this particular video was fun. So if you want to see more analysis of movies, TV shows, I can even go into books and music, comment below and let me know. And if you have something that you yourself have watched or are currently watching that you think has a lot of themes that could be explored, go ahead and comment with a title. We have an Odinani group chat on our Patreon where we discuss different topics in Odinani and Igbo. And I know Avatar comes up like at least once a month, as does The Matrix and different anime here and there. So yeah, if there's anything you want to see me discuss in this light, go ahead and comment below. And with that being said, I'd like to give a shout out to the patrons that make it possible. Alea Boyo, Adaku Utah, Akachi Lamb, Amechi Ekufu, Amaka Adog, Annie, Anthony, Anwulukao, Bissy Life, Celeste Richmond, Sessa Salam, Shante Thomas, Chara Williams, Chelsea E, Chike, Chimoge Ibe, Chinedu Akunne, Chris Abani, Chukudubem A, Chukuma Bartholomew, CK, Cozy, Crystal, Dakaria Dahudi, Didi, Dieries X, Dion, Temni, Emmy, Emeka Enweruso, Emeka Ohia, Erica McBee, Esomchi, Elogun, Eunice Agwim, Jory Bryant with Symbodied LLC, Gerard Miller, Gina England, Grace, Ezeal D. Thomas, Jennifer Harris, Jules, Liz, Malachi Lee, Mary Ayodele, Michael Curran, Mikael Ouna, Mystique, Netter Arts, Ngozi Onoha, Nia, Nick Crenshaw, Nina Nwafia, Namdi Ezuku, Nwaka, the Igbo Cyber Shrine, Obele Osisi, Ofuora, Okechukwu, Ebizie, Olamma Okpara, Olisaemeka Okakpo, Princess Kaha, Rachel Nwokoro, Ross Jones, Sarah Nwafo, Sharika Regina, Stephen Chin, Suva Monte, Tariq, the Homegirl Healer, Tony, Uche Abweze, Uchenna Campos, Uchenna, Valentine Mbadoga, Urenna Kara, and the Venus Freebird Limited Liability Company. To support this channel, join us on patreon.com/TheMedicineShell. And as always, thank you.